The breeze that afternoon carried the scent of roses and something quieter, an ache that didn't have a name yet. I stood a few steps behind the photographer, watching as Callie and Ethan posed with their families. Laughter floated through the air, soft and rehearsed. Rhonda, Ethan's mother, orchestrated the scene like she owned the day. Then she turned toward me. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Please step aside," she whispered, her perfume wrapping around the moment. "These are family photos." The words were smooth, polite, final. I nodded before I realized I'd done it. My feet moved on their own. I stepped back, out of frame, out of their story. Callie didn't look at me. The photographer counted down again. Rhonda slipped in beside her son, chin high, the image of belonging.
I walked toward the reception tent, trying to look busy, pretending I hadn't just been erased. The gift table sat beneath a wall of roses. I found my envelope right away. Plain white, no ribbon, no note. Inside was the check I'd written for $10,000. The same money that had quietly covered the florist deposit and the last-minute expenses Callie never asked me for, but I paid anyway. I didn't open it. I didn't rip it. I just stood there, holding it, until the laughter behind me began to fade. It had started earlier, at the check-in table. A young woman with perfect hair handed guests elegant envelopes sealed in wax. Their names were written in gold calligraphy. When it was my turn, she glanced at me and reached for something behind the stack. A plain badge with block letters. Limited access guest. She didn't explain, just moved on. I stared at it, confused, until I felt the shift of air beside me. Rhonda's perfume arrived before she did. Without looking at me, she murmured, "That means no plate." Then she walked away. Inside, the ballroom glittered with gold-trimmed linens and floating candles. I searched the seating chart, checked the family tables, then the back rows. My name wasn't there. No seat, no plate, no place. I stood near the wall while servers passed trays of champagne and laughter rose like music. Weeks earlier, I'd paid part of the venue deposit after overhearing Callie's stress about costs. She hadn't asked. I'd simply wanted to ease her burden. She thanked me once, briefly, then moved on. I told myself it was her day, that she didn't owe me space. But as I stood there, clutching a useless badge, I realized this wasn't about oversight. It was about exclusion, carefully arranged. I thought back to when Callie was 8 and asked if heaven had windows. I told her maybe, if you loved hard enough, you could still look in on the people you missed. After her father passed 2 years later, I worked longer hours, skipped vacations, sold my wedding ring to help her through college. Every sacrifice was worth it when she smiled. I never expected repayment, just respect. But now, standing in a room I helped pay for, surrounded by strangers eating food I'd helped fund, I understood something bitter. Giving everything doesn't guarantee you'll be remembered when the moment comes. I stayed until the music swelled again, then slipped outside. The sky glowed gold, the kind of light photographers dream about. I walked past the fountain where Rhonda stood, tall and satisfied, a glass of champagne in hand. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She'd already won whatever game she thought she was playing. "Mom, wait!" Callie's voice cut through the air behind me. Her heels clicked against stone. She caught up, tears streaking her face. "Please don't leave like this." I turned to her slowly. "If I hadn't brought an envelope today," I asked softly, "do you think anyone would have noticed I came?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came. "This wasn't about forgetting me," I said, my voice steady. "It was about replacing me." Her lip trembled. "I didn't mean—" "I know," I said, "but you let it happen anyway." I gave her a small smile, the kind you give when there's nothing left to fix, and walked to my car. I set the envelope on the passenger seat, not as a gift, but as proof of what silence costs.
By the time I reached the main road, the music was gone, the lights behind me fading into the trees. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from anger, though it simmered beneath the surface, but from the clarity that comes after something inside you breaks clean. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. 2 messages, Rhonda's first. Let's not let emotions ruin a perfect day. No punctuation, no apology. Then Callie's. We can talk, just don't be mad. Mad. That's what she thought this was, anger, not grief. I turned off my phone and stared at the ceiling fan until the world blurred. Weeks ago, I'd told Callie I had something planned for her honeymoon. She'd smiled absently, barely listening. That check, the one in the envelope, had taken months of side work, sacrifices, skipped dinners. I wanted her to start her marriage unburdened. I gave because I loved. They accepted because they expected. That was the difference. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the envelope. $10,000. It looks smaller now, not in value, but in meaning. I thought it symbolized love, but love had been turned into transaction, and I was just the supplier. 2 days later, Callie texted, "Can we talk? Just us?" When I arrived at their apartment, Ethan was there too, sitting like he'd been warned not to speak. Rhonda was absent, but her presence hung in the air. Callie's eyes were swollen. "I didn't know she changed the list," she whispered. "She said it would simplify things, that it wasn't personal." I nodded. "And when you found out?" "I panicked," she admitted. "I didn't know how to fix it." I reached into my bag, took out the envelope, and placed it on the table between us. "I told you I had something planned for your honeymoon," I said. She looked at it, hope flickering in her eyes. "This was going to be that gift," I paused. "It no longer is." Her face crumpled. "Mom, please, I didn't mean—" "I know," I said softly. "But you let it happen anyway." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Rhonda, I'm not here to talk about Rhonda," I cut in. "I'm here because you needed to see this for what it is. A gift comes from love, but love doesn't survive erasure." Silence filled the room. Callie looked at me differently then, not as the mother she'd outgrown, but as a woman who'd finally stopped asking to be seen. That evening, I sat in my living room with the curtains drawn, the house quiet, except for the soft tick of the clock. I thought about how easily I'd been erased, not out of malice, but out of convenience. That's what stung the most. When someone you love stops seeing you, they don't do it suddenly. It's gradual, like fading ink. You don't realize it's happening until your name is gone from the story altogether. The phone rang the next morning, unknown number, but I knew the voice before she spoke. "Elise," Rhonda began, her tone overly light. "I wanted to touch base." Woman to woman, I said nothing. "There's been so much tension," she continued with a sigh, "and I thought I could clarify things." The photo situation, it wasn't personal. We just didn't want to clutter the frame. Too many people, and it loses focus. "Cluttered," I repeated softly. The words sat heavy on my tongue. I pictured the photo, Callie radiant in her gown, Ethan grinning, Rhonda standing beside them like a queen. And me? The woman who raised the bride, paid the deposits, and stepped aside on cue. "I understand," I said calmly, "but no photo is more disruptive than pretending someone doesn't exist." There was a pause. She hadn't expected that. "I think we can move past this," she offered, her voice tipping toward condescension. "Callie still wants her family united. I know you're important to her." I hung up before she could say another word. There was no argument left to have. She didn't call to reconcile. She called to reassert control. By noon, I'd made up my mind. I dressed neatly, slipped the envelope into my purse, and drove across town to a nonprofit I used to volunteer with years ago. A small organization that supports single mothers going back to school. I'd once been one of those women, unsure and terrified, clutching a check smaller than the one I was carrying now. When I handed it to the director, I didn't make a speech. I simply said, "For whoever needs a start." The woman's eyes filled with gratitude, but mine stayed dry. I wasn't giving to fill an absence anymore. I was giving to reclaim what love should have been all along. Freely chosen, not expected. When I walked out of that office, the air felt lighter. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was simply done being a source of quiet generosity to people who confused love with obligation. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and watched the sun fade through the kitchen window. For the first time in a long while, peace didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like ownership. Days passed in silence. No apologies, no calls, no explanations. Then one afternoon, as I folded laundry, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi, I hope this isn't overstepping, but I wanted to reach out about the wedding. I helped with the guest list. You were originally listed as family, full access, seated at the main table. Your name was changed 3 days before by Rhonda. Ethan approved it." I sat down slowly. The air seemed to thicken. Another message followed seconds later. I remember thinking it was odd, but Rhonda said it was a sensitive situation. "I'm really sorry. 3 days before." I read the words again and again. That wasn't miscommunication. That was intent. They'd known exactly what they were doing, smiling at me, accepting my help, knowing I'd been cut from the list like a stranger. Every moment of doubt, every time I'd told myself I was being too sensitive, it all crystallized into certainty. I hadn't overreacted. I'd been betrayed. I stood up, walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands didn't shake. The clarity was sharp but clean. They'd chosen their comfort over my dignity. That was their story to live with. I didn't need to rewrite it. I blocked Rhonda first. Not out of spite, but out of peace. Then Ethan. There was nothing left between us but unspoken agreement. Silence was easier than truth. Callie didn't call, but she sent a voice note, just under a minute long. Her voice trembled. "I understand if I lost you," she said, "but I do want to fix it. Not for them, for us." I listened twice, then let the message sit there unread again. I didn't know what to do with softness that arrived only after the damage. Some words come too late, even if they're sincere. That afternoon, I walked the coastal trail behind my house. The ocean was gray and restless, the kind of weather I'd always loved. I let the wind tangle my hair and the salt sting my face. The waves moved with no explanation, no apology, and I understood something in their rhythm. I'd spent most of my life smoothing edges, easing conflict, filling silence with kindness, but this silence didn't ache. It was full. It was mine. When I got home, I didn't respond to Callie's message. Maybe not ever. It wasn't because I stopped loving her. It was because I needed to love myself more. For once, peace meant not fixing what others had broken. Weeks slipped by quietly. I didn't wait for updates or invitations. I filled my days differently. I returned to volunteering at the nonprofit, helping women re-enter the workforce after divorce, illness, or years of caregiving. The first day, I sat across from a woman who looked like I once did, unsure but full of potential. "You're not starting over," I told her. "You're starting from experience." She smiled, and something in me settled. I didn't need an invitation to belong anymore. I just needed purpose. One afternoon, after a long day at the office, I opened my mailbox and found a card with Callie's handwriting. Inside it said only, "Not just my mother, my blueprint. I see it now." I stood on my porch reading those words over and over. There was no apology, no justification, just acknowledgement. I folded the card and placed it in a kitchen drawer beside my matches and old receipts, somewhere quiet, but safe. That night, I cooked lemon chicken and roasted vegetables, poured another glass of wine, and ate on the porch as the sky dimmed. The air was calm, the light moving slowly across the deck. There was no music, no toasts, no camera flashes, just me, finally steady in my own company.
For the first time in years, I didn't need a seat at anyone's table to feel like I belonged. I was already home.
If you believe that choosing yourself isn't selfish but necessary, remember to like this video, share it with someone who's learning the same lesson, and subscribe for more stories about finding peace after pain. Tell me in the comments, when did you finally learn to put yourself first?